Hello and welcome to ATARC's webinar series. Today, topic experts will share strategies that agencies can implement to alleviate the concern of the unknown and make operations more efficient. My name is Kirsten, and I'm going to be moderating today's panel. ATARC stands for the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and ATARC is an organization that facilitates collaboration between government, industry, and academia in order to accelerate technology modernization initiatives. We provide ongoing opportunities for cross-agency collaboration through on-site interaction, learning, and market research. I would like to welcome all of our attendees and give a special thanks to Jean Zepp, Dr. Sabari Gupta, and the entire Electrosoft team for making today's event possible. This afternoon, we're going to hear from our panelists. We're going to have a Q&A session, and we're also going to pop up a few polls for the audience to answer. I want to encourage you to submit questions of your own in the Q&A chat, and also be sure to respond to those polls in order to ensure that you receive your CPE credit for today. And with all that said, I'd love to welcome all of our attendees to come on camera and go off mute because we are about to begin a round of introductions. So if you could share with us who you are, what your role is, and what agency or organization you're with, and anything else you'd like to share with our audience up top. Let's start with Jennifer, please.
So good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Franks, and I serve as the director of the Center for Enhanced Cybersecurity at the Government Accountability Office. And in my role, I do two different things specifically. One, I do answer the call of the Congress. So we go into federal agencies and we look at how they are protecting their information systems and the data that resides in those systems and really helping them to enforce cyber resiliency in their programming. Internally for GAO, I do also manage the Analytics Foundry and a large set of specialists that manage our data center and provide incident detection and response capabilities for the organization. And I'm happy to be with you guys today.
Yeah, thank you. We're very happy to have you. Okay, next, let's go to Colonel Hartman. Can you hear me, Colonel Hartman?
Yes, I can.
Okay, yep, I see you now. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Travis Hartman. I'm the Chief Technology at Army Forces Command, and we are responsible for generating the combat power for the Army. So we've got about 750,000 people in our organization, and a wide range of skill sets and knowledge. Everybody from people that maybe have their GED to people that have done postgraduate or postdoctoral work, and with that, we deal with everything from logistics, training, weapons, and networks.
Great. Let's go to Landon next.
Hi, I'm Landon Shaw, and a little bit of housekeeping. The views and opinions of Landon Shaw are the views and opinions of Landon Shaw only, and he does not necessarily speak on behalf of or for the judiciary. I am one of the senior architects for the Administrative Office of the United States Courts in Washington, D.C. We have a team of architects of 4 modernization architects, and I'm one of them. And so I'm very happy to be here today.
Great, fantastic, thank you. Let's go to Dave next.
Hi, I'm Dave Cantrell. I am the CISO of the Bespin Software Factory. We are a cloud and DevSecOps, or cloud and mobile DevSecOps software factory for the Air Force. And we focus on delivering tactical and operational mission effects for our mission partners and customers. I've got about 25, or I guess at this point, 30 years federal and DoD experience. Prior military, I was a software engineer and a systems engineer, and then a security engineer. And I've worked with several software factories currently and in the past, including working with Kessel Run several years ago. And I am involved in assisting with continuous ATO policy within the Air Force and the DoD as well.
Amazing, thank you. Okay, let's go to Dr. Jeannie next.
Or Sarbari Gupta, sorry. Dr. G, okay. Yes, I'm Sarbari Gupta, and I'm the founder and CEO of Electrosoft. our company, we've been providing innovative IT and cybersecurity solutions to different federal agencies, defense and civilian, for many, many years now, since 2001. And personally, I've been working in the information security space for over 2 decades and focusing primarily on cybersecurity risk management and identity management as, two of these sort of specializations. I've also had the opportunity to co-author several NIST special publications in cyber and identity, including 863 and actually even FIPS 201, the standard. And finally, I would like to thank ATARC for hosting this webinar and making it possible for us to serve as a sponsor and inviting all these distinguished panelists. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And then we will hear from Dr. Drini, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Harry Draney. I'm a Naval Surface Warfare Center Dahlgren Division employee. I support the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab full-time as their artificial intelligence development lead within the Science and Technology Division.
Fantastic. All right, so we're going to jump into question number 1 first. We're going to spend about 10 minutes or so here, and we will probably not get to every panelist, but we will then shift to the next question. We'll make sure everybody gets a chance to respond. But Jennifer, I wanted to start with you on question number 1. And again, if any of the panelists really want to respond to this, you can use the raise hand icon or just kind of like wave to me to let me know that you want to go next. Jennifer, how does your agency or team plan to leverage generative AI to enhance cybersecurity programs? And along with that, what specific insight has your work provided about the current cybersecurity challenges?
So awesome question. So AI, we literally cannot go a day right now without talking about AI and the effects of such a technology will have on our enterprises as a whole. And artificial intelligence tools are just powerful means of supplementing our agency's cybersecurity teams. And that is what we're doing. And that is what we're also seeing across the government in many different facets. And where it's been helpful is that many industry leaders from both nonprofit and even the private sector have begun integrating these technologies into their intrusion detection capabilities, their threat profiling, their assessments, and their incident response and tools, which then allow us to also adopt those tools and technologies into our environment so that we can enhance our agency's abilities to really implement greater cybersecurity initiatives, and then proactively and even efficiently try to be on the cutting edge of responding and being able to recover to events when they occur. So for us, primarily right now, we are integrating a lot of our AI tools into our AWS team environment. We are actively moving a lot of our systems from on-premise into the cloud. And with using some of the technologies, we're really enhancing our efforts in that threat profiling and monitoring capability space. That's been really helpful to really leverage the tools and technologies to really put additional guardrails in place to help us just to understand how the machine learning and the data modeling can help us to detect some of the threats and the vulnerabilities and even the anomalies a little bit quicker. And even looking at how AI is utilized to even further protect the sensitive data that resides on these different systems. And we found it very, very helpful for us to really have the potential to work within our agency using the technologies, but also, auditing other federal agencies. We can leverage and see what it is they're doing and how it is they're starting to make these assessments. Because primarily in my role, for the use of Congress, I'm working with agency officials across the federal government, and they are all adhering to applicable guidance and policies and procedures for designing, developing, and even acquiring generative AI tools. So then we are doing the same to model some of those capabilities internally for us as well.
Well, thank you for kicking us off with that, Jennifer, for question number 1. David, did you want to add anything or follow up with that?
Sure. So from our perspective, since we are a software factory, we build and deploy mission systems for ourselves and for customers. I tend to look heavily across the entire DevSecOps spectrum, right? So secure development, delivery, and then application execution and monitoring, right? So when we look at leveraging AI just as a generic concept, for us, I tend to look at it as having three, primary goals, right? So one goal is going to be to accelerate the developer side delivery cycle. So what can we do to enhance developer productivity? So as an example, is it possible to leverage in a secure and safe manner the development environment plugins, IDE plugins that can accelerate their ability to build and deliver code effectively? Can we deepen your inspection and accelerate the risk evaluation within software pipelines, right? So to what extent can we evaluate code commits for security impacts to help reduce the human evaluation effort placed on that? There still has to be a human in the loop, but how can we leverage tools to actually improve that? And then on the actual delivery and operation side, to what extent can we actually leverage those tools to help alleviate some of the noise burden on the monitoring teams and accelerate those risk response cycles? One of the key, I guess, a key insight and a key problem that we keep running into that I think is important to highlight is there are still a lot of issues with generative AI tools regarding the trustworthiness of outputs, even using very advanced models with OpenAI, for example. You still get hallucinations and incorrect results. A very relevant real world example that I actually encountered myself just recently. I took an obscure security tool that we were considering using, an open source tool, and I uploaded the code into the LLM and then requested that it evaluate for coverage against OWASP top 10 mitigations, MITRE top 25 mitigations, that sort of work. And every time I ran the query and ran the model, it gave wildly inconsistent results. Even when the scanners were actually specifically written to implement and mitigate specific MITRE CWEs, they were very ineffective at detecting what that scanner was actually capable of covering. So it ended up with this situation where it was actually easier to manually trace the coverage in this security tool than it was to rely on the actual output of the LLM in that case. So I just caution to be very careful. They're very helpful in a lot of ways, but we do have to be careful of trusting the output.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm going to call for poll question number 1 real quick so that I don't forget. Poll question number 1, again, this is for our audience at home. Please be sure to respond to it if you want to receive your CP credit. It's up on the screen now, and it's asking which area of cybersecurity do you believe generative AI will have the most significant impact on? So please take a moment to respond to that. And Landon, I want to begin with you on our next question, which is what types of AI tools has your organization explored or implemented? Along with that, what lessons have you learned from these efforts and what have you seen when assessing these tools?
I think that the biggest tool assist would be integrated development environments, what people refer to as IDEs. These are frameworks that are used in order to structure your code and write code more effectively. And examples of that would be something like Visual Studio or Cursor is very popular, Windsurf, Microsoft IntelliCode, GitHub Copilot, CodeGPT, Codium. These are all different things that are called IDEs. It's like an application that allows you to write code, and it has the ability to leverage plugins. They are what's called MCP aware. These are new. This is a new structured framework that was recently, like just a couple days ago, adopted by Google. It was an Anthropic AI platform that they kind of came up with a standard to write to be able to talk to have agents communicate using a standardized set of protocols. And these IDEs now have plugins that are MCP aware. So although I don't want to call it a standard because it hasn't been officially ratified, but although it was developed by the Anthropic folks, Google just within the last day or two blessed it and said, you know what, we're going to start adopting the exact same MCP framework. So that's huge. That's a step towards standardization, like an actual standard. So I would say that from a tool perspective, having your developers or your DevSecOps folks utilize an IDE that's in-house where they can just load it on their local machine to write code. Make sure that you choose one that's agent aware, that has the ability to integrate MCP agents. Those are some of the tools that I would say have been very useful. The second part of your question was cybersecurity challenges. I would say that the biggest problem would be that people need to understand that the attackers or malicious actors are also utilizing AI. And so it's not like you're the only one that's using AI to defend your network. They're using it to attack your network, right? So that's huge. The other thing would be that coding large language models, which would be Code Llama, the different large language models that are specifically geared toward coding, Gemini 4.5 Pro, things that are very good at coding. Claude 3.7 Sonnet, right, has a code capability. These coding LLMs are allowing malicious actors to manufacture attacks that are way more unique and targeted than in the past. Most of the time, attackers have always leveraged let's say script kiddies would take a script that was popped out on some dark website and they would just modify a few parameters and then launch the same attack. So very often the attacks that we've seen are utilizing the exact same application or program. They just tweak a couple things. Okay, with the onset of coding LLMs, these attacks are getting very sophisticated because now the attacker doesn't have to have any code experience. They just have to prompt a code LLM to generate an attack. And these LLMs that are code LLMs are experts in writing code, like Python code. So now you're getting almost like an expert level coder crafting an attack that the malicious actor themselves do not need to have the expertise in order to craft that code. They can now craft very unique and targeted code sets. And I think this is something that a lot of agencies, I'm sure people are aware of it, but it needs to be given thought because we are now going to be in an era where we experience completely different types of attacks, unlike anything we've ever seen before, because it's not a rinse and repeat of something that some hacker organization put out on the dark web. Now these are manufactured attacks that are created on the fly. So that's huge to remember that. The other thing is if you have the more data that you have available to your security teams internally, and by that I mean log data, right? Log data, although you're parsing data after something has occurred, the more data you have in near real time as possible, the easier it's going to be to find that needle in the haystack. So utilizing a SIEM that has some kind of integration of gathering maybe logs that before you would have thought you did not need, you probably need them now because these attacks are becoming very difficult to thwart. And so I guess the takeaway here is large data sets of whatever logs you can put into a very large SIEM would be great. I think people need to concentrate on putting more data into their SIEM than they have in the past because of what I just mentioned. And then the last thing, and I'll yield to someone else, is that people should remember that attackers do not follow agency policies, right? You have policies within your agency that you're meant to follow, but malicious actors have no such policies. So what would be under like a lot of agencies would say, okay, we're not going to retaliate on an attack. We're just going to defend, right? Well, that's not the way the attacker thinks, right? They have no guardrails that they've are constrained by. So I think people need to understand those things. Those are just a handful of things that I thought would be noteworthy to mention, because I think people don't realize how easy it is to craft attacks today, more so than any time in the past, because these large language models are so awesome at writing code right now.
Thank you, Landon. Thank you for sharing that. And also there's a Q&A in the chat, so you can type a response to that, not just you, Landon, any of the panelists, if you feel inclined to respond to that. We just don't have time right now, so we've got to keep it moving. But Dr. Gupta, generative AI introduces new risks, right, such as adversarial exploitation, ethical concerns, and data privacy challenges. So I want to ask you first, how is it that we mitigate these risks while ensuring responsible adoption of the technology?
Sure. Thank you for that. So, first of all, the perspective that I'm bringing to the table here as the industry participant on this panel is that of a government contractor that supports cybersecurity programs. And so the kinds of AI use cases we've been looking at are primarily to help our programs to do a better job, faster, better, at a lower cost, let's say, serve our customers better. And so specifically, let's see, the risks that we've been looking at, let's see, so before I get to risks, let's talk about some of the use cases we've been looking at. So one of the major use cases we've been considering is how to use AI to serve as a private chatbot to our cybersecurity analysts as they do their job, and as they work with sensitive data and have to follow the policies of their organization. And so what we did was we set up a test case, a test environment for such a chatbot. And we've been looking at ways to use that chatbot to help our cybersecurity analysts. Now, some of the major risks, that we're seeing at this time, based on the way we've been trying to use AI, has been the privacy and hallucinations. I don't remember who mentioned it, maybe David. AI is still very susceptible to delivering outputs, that have hallucinations. And so anytime our employees, our staff use AI to support a customer or even to do corporate tasks, we want to make sure that they are not falling prey to such hallucinations, and so that they're cross-checking. And then the other big risk is privacy. It is so easy to use these, free, especially LLMs like OpenAI ChatGPT. And we really want to make sure that our staff members do not leak sensitive information to these chatbots, as they're trying to use them to do their work. And to mitigate these risks, I think we've been taking steps such as establishing AI usage policy within the organization, governance of AI use, as well as training on how to best leverage AI, and also to sort of make sure that we don't fall into the traps that AI frequently gets us into.
Absolutely, thank you. And I wanted to hear from Harry next. Do you have anything you'd like to contribute to this question, or anything that you've heard previously, Dr. Draney?
Thank you. And first off, my apologies for not having my camera up. I work in a secure space, so the cameras are not allowed. So, from our perspective, so I support the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab, and we focus mostly on the Marine at the tactical edge. So our perspective from an organizational standpoint is a little different, right? As we're technology developers, we look at things like, how are we going to help protect the warfighter on the edge with the systems that they're using? There's a saying in the military: if they can see me, I'm a target. And so we know that the data, or the cloud, or the network, whatever the word is that you want to use for what is supporting the warfighter on the edge, will be seen by the enemy and thus be a target. So we are doing things in the tech development side of things within the DoD to conduct adversarial testing. So we create red teams and we come up with malicious AI to actually combat the systems that we have, and sort of identify where those vulnerabilities do exist, and how they can be exploited, thus giving us sort of a path to try and figure out how to mitigate that. And one thing that's important is that I use the word mitigation versus prevention. We don't have any delusions that we think we can stop a well-funded, well-trained, aggressive adversary who is trying to create a malicious attack. But we do believe we can mitigate it. We can make it hard. We can deter, maybe even deceive and send them in a wrong direction, or force them, or allow them to identify, or to receive information that is incorrect, and thus send them in a different direction. So that adversarial testing is helping us get to sort of that understanding. A couple of other things, right, is the data governance. So specifically, on the tactical edge, it sort of goes with that mitigation aspect I was talking about. So we're looking at not only do we do our adversarial testing, we're looking at these tools that we can deploy with our warfighters at the edge that will help manage the data, and meaning that when a warfighter is using data, they need to trust that that data has been vetted, that data is correct, and it has a high fidelity. And so by doing that, we've implemented significant data governance steps and processes that give the warfighter the sense of they know that the data that they have is correct and usable. There's a term that we want to have actionable information or intelligence, and so the part of that data governance will help our warfighters on the edge be able to utilize that information in a way that they can be successful in completing their mission. So another thing is explainability. So it's very, very important in our world that the user has an understanding, at least at the right level, understanding of being able to explain how and why the system that they're using is doing what it's doing. So in the terms of AI or generative AI in the cybersecurity realm, just saying, hey, don't worry about it, it's got it, usually isn't the right way to train our Marines on the edge. So we want to make sure that there's a level of explainability so that when they're using a system and maybe they get some sort of indication of a threat or an indication of a breach, that they understand how we came to that. Was it an anomaly detection? Was it a different data protocol? Whatever the case may be, there should be some sort of understanding presented to the user about how that works. That allows them to use the mitigation steps that we've also created, so they can use the right ones, or use it with the confidence that they need in order to do the mission that they have. So I guess I'll wrap up by saying we really look at this really difficult balance between creating the security that our warfighters need to do their job on the edge, but also still allowing ourselves to be innovative. And so that can be difficult, right? I just mentioned a bunch of things that we do with regards to data governance and strict processes and policies that probably stifle innovation at some levels. So trying to provide the warfighter with the highest level of cybersecurity using AI, which is still a relatively, kind of unknown space when it comes to the full capability of it. And then not stifling the innovation that is required to actually get to where we're trying to be. So I'll leave you with that is sort of the biggest challenge for thought leaders, especially in the DoD. Not that in the civilian sector there aren't its own challenges, but there's restrictions and things that we deal with that make this, sort of an order of magnitude more difficult.
Yeah.
And so I'll step back from there. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for your contribution. Travis, I want to ask you next, how is your organization preparing its workforce to effectively use and oversee generative AI tools in cybersecurity operations?
All right. Well, first, let me throw a little context, and that is people want to be effective, and they want to be efficient, and they want to be able to do their jobs. And I saw Landon's answer in the chat about having private LLMs or LLMs running in government space. Contextually, what happened a year plus ago, ChatGPT came out and people's like, oh, this is nifty. I can use it to do all sorts of things. And shortly after Army official guidance came out, it's like, no, do not write your evaluation reports. Don't do all of these things because your information's out there. But we also wanted to make people more efficient, more effective, give them the tools. So within DoD, we have multiple platforms, in particular on the unclassified side, that have various LLMs available. ATARC Saber / Nipper GPT, Camo GPT, can test out RAG configurations in those, choose different models, have the ability to run various models locally in different environments. So it's really helping people be able to get after some of that efficiency, to be able to maybe experiment with things and not go out to those commercial environments because they actually really have that alternative. So, okay, how are we actually preparing around cybersecurity? The first thing is trying to reduce the meta work. That all the stuff that's not cybersecurity. What's your report generation time? How many hours are wasted on that? Or if I can harvest those hours by using the Gen AI to look at all the activities that happened, looked at my calendar events, look at the things, the different rules that were maybe created for different sensors, and generate the report from that without having another person go back through and do it. Great. I've now harvested time. I'm letting my analyst go focus on what they're really needing to do. Another aspect of making Gen AI available is how we're exposing people to it. And one thing that we do is make sure that the first time somebody is using one, that they're using it and they're asking questions or they're working in stuff where they have domain expertise. Great, I've got decades of cybersecurity experience. I could probably judge if it's making up an answer that's completely out there. If I ask it about tracked vehicle maintenance for an Abrams battle tank, I would have no idea if it was making stuff up or not. I'd say, oh, yeah, okay, it sounds good to me. And by having people start with that area where they've got that deep domain knowledge and use that for their initial LLM interactions, it instills a sense of caution that they're not automatically going like, this is great. I could run fast with it and then stumble. They're like, well, it is a little bit wobbly. I need to be careful. I can pick up speed over time, but I need to use caution because it's a little bit different there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And Jennifer, we've kind of made our way back around to you. Is there anything that you'd like to add based on what's been shared in this question or previous questions?
Sure. I'll do the training question because upskilling talent is something that is very critical for all of us at this point. You have to build a strong foundation of folks understanding the data and why it's critically important to your organization's enterprise. Once you figure out the why, what are you protecting and what are the critical needs of your protection models, you can then start to invest in the people that are really performing the work. So There's a lot of conversation around how AI could replace certain technical talent. And yes, it certainly can. But what it is we're looking at in the cybersecurity areas is really looking at the upskilling, because most cybersecurity specialists, we enjoy learning. I mean, every day is a different day, new vulnerabilities, new software and hardware and technologies that we need to figure out how to better secure. And this is really no different. So really understanding how the models work. So upskilling our talent to understand data literacy from a different lens, upskilling our talent to be able to take the AI technology data and utilize it to assist us with the threat modeling capabilities and looking at the outward scope of what could come down the line. So not really just taking the data at face value, but really creating different use case scenarios that could be applicable to your environment and even other agencies as well. And then tooling proficiency, really looking at what is really going to be needed for your environment, creating a dashboard perhaps, and really learning how to work with the dashboard and not necessarily around the different tools. So what it is we've decided to do, we are implementing, well, designing and deploying different types of AI tools and technologies to then implement, but we're giving our specialists time to familiarize themselves with the technologies, the what, the why, the hows, so that they're familiar with what it is we then need to do on the back end of then implementing the technology across the environment and then better protecting the data that is utilized and transferred within the different language model data sets. So we're doing a lot of that, and it's really helping us to create a more visible outline across our environment of where AI could really further increase our proficiencies. A lot of the things we do, like most folks here, is we do things manually. We have humans actually managing the information in the SOC, managing information from an audit and logging perspective and the continuous monitoring efforts. But as we're seeing more of how these tools can be utilized, and then we're training other individuals, it's really giving us that foresight of what it is we can do to just move forward with actually making greater advancements in our organization and having the benefits of the technology.
Absolutely. There's a audience question that came in. I feel like a lot of what you just shared from Isaac Wright asking, how do we ensure that we don't lose subject matter expertise in critical fields like cyber, leaning too hard into letting the models do the work? So I think a lot of what you said, much of the domain expertise comes from rolling up your sleeves and learning how to think hard about tough problems. So a lot of what you just said, Jennifer, I think you covered that question.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think most of us rather, are worried that it could replace, but the majority of us cybersecurity specialists, we're rolling up our sleeves to assist in doing the work, because we cannot necessarily replace all of the intricacies and the nuances that we as the humans can do to really be on the cutting edge of responding to the evolving threats from around the globe. So it is one of those things where we're looking to accelerate the education from our employees, from our staff, so that we can be better prepared to do so.
Absolutely. So we have a few more minutes here before we need to move on to the next question. Is there any other comments from our panelists that go ahead, Sarbari.
Yeah, I wanted to echo a couple of the points I heard. I think Dr. Greeny mentioned data governance, and this came up in several conversations recently with one of our DoD customers. As they're moving into AI and leveraging AI and using the RAG model, retrieval, augmented generation, et cetera, knowing like how to govern the data that is fed into RAG, is really important. So data governance is very important as we talk about AI governance. And the other point that I want to echo was, I think Travis brought up report generation, tedious tasks like report generation. So specifically, let's say our company, we run several security operations centers for different federal customers. And at the end of each shift, usually these are 24/7 SOC operations. And so we'll have, 3 or 4 shifts per day. So as each shift moves from their job and handing it over to the next shift, there's usually a shift, ending report that we hand over. So we've been experimenting with using AI to generate those, shift end reports. Again, it's a tedious task, and AI could, can easily generate it. We've developed some solutions for that. There was some other point I wanted to mention, but again, let's leave it at that for now.
Sure, thank you. Landon, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a few guidelines that may be helpful. One of them would be any databases or data set, just to address the question that was asked in the chat a little more verbosely. The data sets or databases that you may have that you want to leverage AI to comb through, those very often are going to contain different types of PII or some type of information. There's going to be some data classification associated with that, whether it's proprietary, just maybe agency proprietary, or it could just be public information. It may be non-public. It may be some kind of sensitive. It's going to be marked however, your data marking policy is within your agency. But those type of data sets and any data set should be discussed with local either CISOs or a CAIO before allowing any work with AI. So people just the employees of the agency should go through some type of training to make sure that before they employ the use of an AI, especially with data sets that are intellectual property of the agency in which they are working for, that those data sets should be, that conversation should be had with either a CISO or a CAIO if you happen to have one for your agency, before that work is granted, essentially like an authorization to operate, before your employees try to do that. Another thing would be that local LLM should be used, if possible, before utilizing anything in the cloud, because a lot of these queries that go to the cloud, they may require an API key in order to be sent, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everything is being sent encrypted, and you don't necessarily know where that where the endpoint resides. You may not even know the agency that controls that endpoint. And if everything that you send is logged, you definitely do not want to be sending code snippets that, for a new secure application that you're going to write for your SOC. And then you're essentially giving the entire application to an unknown entity that's actually combing through logs on the large language model that you're using in the cloud. So sensitive, anything that's sent to the cloud, you should just assume that that is going to be in the cloud and stay in the cloud forever, and it will never be deleted. And when people say, oh, how could they keep that much data? You could look at like the Wayback Machine, like the Internet Archive. They've archived almost every website since the inception of the internet. So going back in time and looking at things is just going to be easier and easier with AI. The other thing would be there should be mandatory AI training for all employees and contractors within an agency. And that's kind of generic. Everybody says, oh, yeah, of course, we're going to be doing some kind of training. But the training should involve something that has to do with guardrails. Like your organization should have some type of guardrails in place. And these guardrails should be for just the general use of AI, but then they should have separate guardrails for using AI to write code that's then going to be utilized within your agency. So there should be a generic training just with the use of AI, but then there should be specific training for DevSecOps folks on coding guardrails. And examples of that would be that you do not want your generative, any code that's generated from a generative AI, you don't want that AI to be managing your API keys. That is not what you want, right? So if you ask an AI to generate code, you do not want to put the security of your application in the hands of the AI to secure it. So by that, I mean, an AI can write an application from beginning to end in seconds. you don't want your security to be determined by the AI. There should be a human intervention in wrapping security around the code. And so the AI should not have a management of your API keys, and all the code that's generated by the AI should be reviewed by a human. And that gets back to the comment that was just made a moment ago about will engineers where their purpose go away and be replaced with AI. I think that there's always going to need to be a human component because humans are going to think a little bit differently than an AI will. The AI may be very literal and may do a great job at writing code, but there needs to be a human that reviews that code. You should trust but verify your code, right? And so if the AI writes the code, you should have an expert code writer review it just to put on their thinking cap from a security standpoint and say, oh, okay, maybe why don't we take this API key management routine out and we're going to secure that separately. And then the last thing would be that people should employ like golden rules of coding. And there are so many great rules of coding but if I just do them very quickly, it would be like, make sure that whatever code that is written, you do frequent commits into like a GitHub repository or some kind of concurrent versioning system if you're doing it on-prem and you don't want to put that up on GitHub. You should commit often. Because especially if AI is generating the code, it could generate something that is near perfect, and then you change the prompt slightly just to try to tweak one thing, and the whole code could get rewritten, and now you've just lost your perfect generated code, and that is not easy to get back after it's kind of not been committed. So you should commit often, right? Another one would be split your code into small segments. When you're writing it, do small little modules. Don't try to have the AI write a huge application from beginning to end, because it's going to be impossible to go back and edit. It's very difficult to do that if you don't divide your modules, your code or your application into smaller modules. The other thing would be you should start new conversations often, because when you're using AI now, these AIs have a memory and they have a tendency to pull on something they've provided you before. And sometimes you can go down a rabbit hole where you get stuck in a loop where the AI keeps referring back to an answer that it gave you previously, and you're kind of hitting a dead end. So a way around that is start a new conversation so that the memory of that conversation is gone and the AI is fresh, right? Another one would be one task per prompt. Don't give it a prompt to build your entire application, right? One small task per prompt, have it create a module, and then have it later go back and link all those modules together. That it makes it easier to troubleshoot when there's a problem. The other thing would be every function that you create, that you have an AI generate code for, should have a corresponding test. And by that, I mean, when you prompt the AI to generate the code, ask the AI for each little module, because see, now we're building on steps here. You created a tiny module because we're doing one module at a time. You tell the AI, when you create this module, I want you to create a corresponding test to verify the code of the module you just wrote. Have the AI do the test for you in line. And that gets to the next point. Have the AI document every routine in the code, because the AI is great at documentation. So when it writes a piece of code, you can have the AI document the code in line in the form of comments for every module in the code. And then the other one is what I already mentioned. Don't trust the AI with your API keys, and don't trust the AI to secure your application, right? Because what will happen is if you have the AI commit and it's controlling your AI keys, and let's say you do decide to use GitHub, now you just committed something to a GitHub repository that has all your API keys in it. And that will be devastating, right, if you did that. So those are just some things, some golden rules of coding that I think are interesting when we're talking about tool sets used with AI. These are just some things that people can keep in mind. Essentially, the takeaway is create guardrails for your DevSecOps folks and make sure they follow those guardrails.
Thank you, Landon. Okay, David, over to you.
Yes, thank you. So I wanted to touch on a couple of things. One that briefly that Landon mentioned, but one that Dr. Drini mentioned earlier. So when the way that we work with mobile capabilities, the comments that he made regarding specific dangers and risks out on the tactical edge resonate very, very deeply with me and the folks on our team. When I know this is fairly unique to the military, right? But some of these situations can occur in other environments as well. When you're operating on the military side at the tactical edge, you have signals intelligence, for example, where adversaries are constantly monitoring the spectrum and the bandwidth of the communications spectrum to identify targets of interest. And so with AI tools, you have this tension, right? Because you have hostable AI tools, but then the AI tools require a significant amount of computing power. So you have to identify what the actual use case is for your AI. Are you placing AI into something that is an appropriate level of compute for that capability? Or are you going to rely on network communications? If you're going to rely on network communications, then you're increasing the signal that you're sending out, that you're beaconing out from your devices. So now you're creating another situation where you're actually making yourself potentially more flexible from an engineering standpoint, but now you're making yourself a larger target, right? So it creates this interesting tension point that like Dr. Jean said, is much more complex on the military side. And to to Landon's point, the thing that I fundamentally would say is make sure you focus on your data security fundamentals, because you have this data supply chain aspect, right, which is present in cybersecurity regardless. What we care about is the data and the data transport and the data location. So when you adopt an AI tool, especially with vendors, sometimes the details can become very fuzzy. You have to remember that you are responsible for where your data is located, where the model is located that you're using, and there can be many models in play without you realizing it. You have to become responsible for the trustworthiness of the model itself. There's an entire supply chain for that AI model that you have to take into account. You have to be responsible for the secure transport of that data to the model, and then understand the ownership of who is processing that data, and then the transport of the data back. You're assuming that risk. You cannot outsource that risk, right? So if you're dealing with externally hosted tools, you have to be very, very careful when you are hitting these API endpoints, because you don't know what's behind them. I experienced this very directly with a tool where when you went to read the documentation, they were very explicit in their documentation. Yes, you're hitting an API endpoint, but once it hits that API endpoint, they will send it anywhere in the world at their discretion to the model vendor of their discretion. And they do not make any claims or assertions about protection of your data sovereignty or your data integrity, and that you remain liable for accepting the risk of all of the data model providers that they choose to interact with. So you have to be very careful when you're interacting with these network services.
Yeah, thank you, David. Okay, real quick, we're going to pop up our second poll question, and we'll do the third one back to back. So for our audience, again at home, this is for your CPE credit. Poll question number 2 up on the screen. What do you think is the biggest barrier to adopting generative AI in the federal cybersecurity programs? We'll leave that there for a minute, and then ATARC, if you could pull up poll question number 3 afterwards, and we will answer that. But what I want to do now is I want to go around, and to kind of wrap things up, I want to hear from each of you, a minute each. Share with me what's one piece of advice that you'd offer other agencies that are just starting to explore this technology for their own cybersecurity programs. So just one piece of advice, word of wisdom, encouragement, whatever you're feeling. Let's begin first. Harry, do you mind kicking us off with this last question?
Yeah, thanks, Kirsten. The sort of the lasting thought process that I would leave you with is think about how you can integrate AI doing or helping with your cybersecurity into your current systems. If you get wrapped around the axle and trying to implement something completely brand new, you may find that the challenges are very, very difficult to mitigate. So look to integrate your cybersecurity tools, specifically using artificial intelligence, into your existing systems. You know, in the system engineering process, there's a box you have to check, like safety, right? Every single system has to go through a safety check. Well, your AI and cybersecurity box doesn't really exist right now in the technology development process. So I would encourage you to do that, right? Put that process, that step in the process there, and find a way to integrate that capability into your existing system, so that you're not taking on this large task of implementing something brand new, and thus maybe even, you know, eliminating the capability of a previous system because they're not compatible. So that's what I'll leave you with: integration.
Thank you so much. Travis, let's hear from you next.
Phone a friend. You're probably not the first organization, whether you're government or industry, that's trying to do whatever it is with integrating a tool. Reach out. There's lots of user communities. There's various forums. ATARC provides a way to help make those linkages. And hey, if you're in government and you'd like to have a hour conversation with me and probably any of the other government panelists, we're most likely very interested in helping you understand what we've done. We're going to ask what you've done, and so we can avoid those pitfalls. Ultimately, if we're all paid for by the same taxpayers, let's learn the lesson once, share that information out there, and really increase efficiencies.
Thank you. Jennifer, you're next.
For me, I agree with what the Colonel just said, but start small, pilot small, think about what it is you can do in a very small controlled environment with very few people being impacted if the tool does not necessarily work the way you intended it to work. And with that, you can start to educate and train the users on what it is you're piloting, and then scale it to the full enterprise as needed. So really managing your investments. Obviously, funding is restricted for a lot of us for a lot of different reasons, but start small and then gradually increase to a full-scale production of AI use across your organization.
Thank you. David, you want to go next?
Sure. My one takeaway here would be to understand the risk that you're choosing to take. Adopting AI, it doesn't change the fundamental nature of cyber risk management, right? At the end of the day, you are still securing servers, networks, containers, data transport, et cetera. It doesn't change any of that. The LLM tools and other AI tools are simply hosted in those environments, whether it's internal or external. So you still have all of your core cyber hygiene requirements, your OWASP top 10s, all of your other compliance requirements. What AI does is it adds a new element of risk and trustworthiness concerns regarding the nature of the AI operation itself, and the provenance and transport of that data, and the trustworthiness of the data that you send out and the responses that you get back. So when you choose to implement this, intentionally take the risk. And by that, I mean, we can never get away with zero risk, right? There is always risk inherent in any action and operation we take. And our job as cybersecurity professionals is fundamentally to advise and assist the mission owners in understanding the risk that they're attempting to take and helping them mitigate those risks to an acceptable level. So make sure that you understand and clinically assess the risk that you are considering taking, and you can definitely carefully and properly advise those mission owners on how to mitigate those risks.
Thank you. Sabari, let's hear from you next.
Sure. My one takeaway would be to really check out, locally hosted LLMs, private LLMs, for solving different cybersecurity problems, especially given the risks in the cybersecurity arena, and preferably to do it in a test environment first. I think Jennifer mentioned doing small pilots, to kind of check out the capabilities and the potential new risks in a test environment before you deploy more broadly across the organization.
Thank you. And Landon, we'll end with you.
Yeah, probably two things. One, to key off what David had said, the one takeaway would be that any LLM or agent or MCP server that you use in the cloud, when you're sending that data to the cloud, it's not just that you don't know who has access to that data. It's that very often these agencies that are hosting, or the organizations that are hosting these cloud LLM servers that have all these great agents that you can leverage, your MCP servers at no cost, how do you think they're keeping them at no cost? And they're selling your data, right? And so that is one very common method for somebody to offer something for free, because they're making money on the back end by selling metrics or actual data, that the free use of their tool. So that's number one, right? Always keep in mind, whatever you send is probably being sold, and the freer, the more free a service offering is in the cloud, the more likely that your data is being sold when using that free resource, right? That's one thing. The other takeaway would be, make sure you choose the right AI for the job, right? Because there are AIs that are very specific to specific tasks. They were written and I would say curated to do specific tasks. So examples would be, there are large language models that are multilingual. There are large language models that are more multimodal, where they can take input from images or videos or sound or audio. There are large language models that are reasoning large language models that are specifically designed for logic, others that are specifically designed for, say, medical use or for coding. So it's important to choose the right large language model for the task, because I think if people don't understand that there are these different large language models and they have very inherent different functions, they also have inherent costs that are very different. If you use a deep research model from OpenAI, you're going to be paying a lot of money for that. So maybe you don't need a deep research model just to write a response to an email, right? You can use an open source, cheap, free LLM to do that. But then likewise, if you're doing some kind of research paper and you need documented proof, like doctoral level proof of something, you might want to pay for a deep research model and pay the cost of, in token cost, of how much it would be to actually take the LLM and have it run for 3 hours and generate you a PhD level report.
All right,
So
Landon, we're running out of time. I just really quickly, I need to thank our partners at Electrosoft for today's event. Dr. Gupta, is there anything else that you'd like to say before we go?
Not really. Just wanted to thank you again, Kristen, for running the show, and also thank the panelists, the ones that are still on with us, for sharing your experiences and observations. And yeah, thank you.
It's been a blast. Thank y'all so much. Have a great rest of your week.
you too.
Bye.